because I can only imagine the standing ovation Felipe Franks would have gotten as he trotted onto that field.
They booed him.
They booed him? I didn't watch the start of it.
They booed him.
Oh, wow.
They booed him at the very start.
Oh, wow. Well, that's typical to them.
But another thing is, after the game, I saw it, and all of the players on Florida and Dan Mullen, they had a line going to talk to him. And
Absolutely.
obviously, I mean, you can't take what fans are saying to the heart. I mean, that's just a fan base. You go to any stadium, Twitter, whatever, and you'll see all kinds of takes of whatever whatever it may be. Obviously, though, I think Franks had playing really good now. I mean, he may not have been that guy for Florida, but it was really awesome to see all of those guys, come out and talk to Franks and just show how much of a leader he was on that team and how much those guys, really like him and, still kind of keep close with him. I think that's awesome. And then seeing Dan Mullen, get personal with him. And it's just, I think that's another thing that, Florida does good. Obviously, Dan Mullen talks to the refs a lot, and I know that can get on opposing teams' nerves. I mean, Missouri fight, whatever. Putting that aside, he's a great recruiter. He has great relations with his players, and that's a difference maker in top tier programs.
Absolutely. And Dan Mullen, that's just what I love about him. He never stops coaching. I remember last season against Tennessee, it was Kyle Trask's first start. The offense walked onto the field a little slow. The game was pretty much over. Florida was steamrolling Tennessee at that point. They were up like 38-3 near the end of the game. They just kind of walked out there. I believe I think it was probably Jacob Copeland, honestly, was kind of dancing around to the music. Dan Mullen calls a timeout and starts screaming at these dudes. When the game is pretty much sold in over, Florida's going to win the game. Dan Mullen calls a timeout and screams at these guys. I just find that hilarious, but that's what separates great programs from the programs that are never quite there. That's what separates teams like Alabama from, in my opinion, a team like Texas A&M. Jimbo Fisher, as much as I despise the guy, he is a great coach. He just isn't that kind of guy. He's not a very aggressive guy. But then you look at Nick Saban, who is up big on guys. He's still calling timeouts and still screaming at his offensive and defensive coordinators, no matter what the score is. That's what separates, and that's why I really love the position Florida is in right now with Dan Mullen.
Yeah, I totally agree there. And I look back to Arkansas's game against Mississippi State. I think like Mike Woods was celebrating because it was our first SEC win in 21 days. And Mike Woods is a guy who, he stuck through the Chad Morris era and, opted not to transfer, leave the program. We just beat Mississippi State, who at the time beat LSU, who obviously at the time looked good. Obviously it may not mean as much now, but I think Mike Woods was like, he got a 15-yard sportsmanlike penalty that almost could have cost us the game. And Sam Pittman just got on him. And like you said, culture is a big part of these programs. But obviously, you look at this game and Florida, they keep playing good. Arkansas, its future, I don't think has changed at all by this game. And
not at all.
Yeah, that's just the gist of it. Arkansas special teams, though, has been really bad this year. How are we still kicking kicks out of bounds? I don't get that. And then punts just haven't been the same. But, I mean, you just got to clean that up. But I will talk about Arkansas's grades real quick. I'm going to give the offense a B+. I liked what I saw from Felipe Franks. Obviously, he didn't have a lot of time in the pocket, so it made it kind of difficult from him. But a adjusted 80+% completion rate was really impressive from him. Having Traylon Smith and Boyd both rush for 200+ yards combined with a couple other guys was really nice. And it's good to have a balanced offense in rushing. I'm struggling here. It's good to have a balanced offense as 250 in the air, 200 on the ground. That's something we haven't seen out of Arkansas. Big positives there. And then obviously with Warren hurt, this offense is going to hurt a little bit. And that's a big loss for this program. I hope he gets healthy real quick because he's probably going to come back for his 6th year because he got the COVID eligibility, as all players have the option to come back. Obviously they have a scholarship. But I'm interested to see what Woods and Burks are going to be able to do the rest of the season. Defense, I'm going to give a D+. I could give him worse like I've seen. But you're playing Florida. What do you expect? Obviously, they got burnt. We couldn't create any defensive line pressure. The wide receivers just jumped all over. Trask just had all the time in the pocket he wanted, and he didn't really even need that, to be honest. He just kind of was able to read the defense like that. And then whatever he saw, he just threw it to some guy I've never heard of, and he got a touchdown. So really impressive from Trask, and I wouldn't put that on the defense. Special teams, I'm just going to give a D-. I think kicking out of bounds is just so unacceptable, and I just think that, we got to change something there. Overall, I'm going to give this team a C. I could be generous giving this team that, but you play a top-tier program like Florida, I mean, what do you expect almost?
Yeah. It's just one of those things, playing a team like that and a team that's hot like Florida right now. So I guess I'll go ahead and give my grades for the Florida Gators in this game. I'll give the offense an A+. I mean, this offense just keeps doing what it's doing all season long. They're averaging, I think, the most points in the country right now. They're just an unstoppable force, and if this keeps going, it's going to be tough for any team to stop these guys, because it's looking like right now this offense, if you want to have a hope, you have to score 40 or more, and I just don't know how many teams are going to be able to do that aside from a team like Alabama. Defense, I'm going to give it a C, because they did give up so many big plays. Felipe Franks had 2 bombs for touchdowns to the same guy. The second one, the offensive wide receiver just bullied the corner, and it was just ugly. They gave up the big run too. That has to get cleaned up. I understand it was against a team like Arkansas, but that's going to become more often when you're playing a guy like Najee Harris and playing a bunch of 5-star receivers with Mac Jones throwing to him in Atlanta. That has to get cleaned up, or otherwise Florida may get steamrolled too, or be getting a shootout, which I do not want against Alabama. And special teams, I'll give them an A. Evan McPherson, maybe the most reliable kicker in the SEC, and Jacob Finn has done a really good job replacing Tommy Townsend. And overall, the kicking team on kickoffs got a couple of times backed up Arkansas deep into their own territory. So I'm really liking what I'm seeing out of Florida. All in all, I'll give them a B+ for this game.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. Your defense, the defense really never stopped playing. They obviously had that touchdown let down in garbage time. But, you're giving up 3 big touchdowns. And like you said, when you're playing guys like Najee Harris, who's probably might be the first back on in the NFL draft, you're playing guys like Jalen Waddle. Not Jalen Waddle, my bad.
Devontae Smith is primarily.
Yeah, Devontae Smith. Yeah, because Waddle is getting his cast off this week, and he may play in the college football playoff. I just thought that was interesting, even though, Arkansas is not even in that talk at all. But I think for both of these teams, their future is bright.
Oh, absolutely. I definitely could see in the future, with how both programs are trending, Florida's starting to get back to what they used to be, contending for championships. They are a defense away from being a powerhouse. And I honestly see a lot of 2 years ago, Dan Mullen's first year at Florida, in this Arkansas team. Dan Mullen takes in a lot of the Jim McElwain trash from when a lot of people thought destroyed the program, and now he's turned it back in just a few seasons. Of course, the back-to-back 2-10 seasons for Arkansas, hadn't won an SEC game in a couple years, and now you got Sam Pittman at the helm, you got Felipe Franks laying the groundwork for the new culture. I feel like this Arkansas team could really become something special, and who knows, maybe down the road, Sam Pittman and Dan Mullen will meet in an SEC championship game at some point.
Yeah, I think if you look at the SEC, the schools on the rise in the SEC West are like A&M's looking pretty good right now. Obviously, it depends on how much returning talent they get. LSU's kind of having a down year, but Bama's really good. The West is a little bit harder than the East, not this year, but just overall, because the East is really a competition between Florida and Georgia.
Absolutely.
I think that Drinkwitz is going to lead Mizzou to contend up there. But the East is a little bit different than the West, so it's going to be harder. But I just wanted to throw this out there. Obviously, Arkansas and Florida weren't scheduled to play. Arkansas received Georgia and Florida as a combination of their two teams because it was pretty evident that Greg Sankey in the SEC kind of just wanted to give these top-tier programs a bunch of easier teams so they could get into the playoff. And I guess I'm fine by that because I think when you play elite competition, you take a lot of things away from the game instead of beating Vanderbilt. But anyway, I think a lot of things out of this game to work on, which is really a key point for rebuilding a program. And I don't know about you, but I'm a fan of this 10-game SEC schedule. I love seeing week in and week out. Obviously, if there's no postponements, 7 SEC games against each SEC school. There's not going to be a time where I turn it on ESPN2 and I'm watching Florida beat the living out of Charleston Southern or something. You know what I mean? I'm a big fan of this 10-game SEC schedule. I just want to get your thoughts on that. Do you like it? I mean, obviously you have to give money to the smaller schools so they don't go in extinction, so it's not going to happen again. But yeah. I would be a fan of upping the SEC to 9 games.
I would like that too, honestly. I feel like the less cupcakes for these power programs, the better. Because I don't want to watch Alabama play freaking FIU. I don't want to watch that. I want to watch Alabama play Oregon. I want to watch them play Ohio State or Michigan, even though that wouldn't be a football game. But still, I want to see these teams play out-of-conference schedules that matter. And if you play a more condensed schedule where there's more SEC opponents, you're going to have to add, I think, a rule to where, say it's a 10 conference games. One of them, sure, you can have an FCS school come in, you can play Richmond or JMU or something like that. But you got to play somebody worth it. Like, I mean, just play a Michigan. Even though they're not going to be that good, play a Michigan. Play a name like that. I loved a few years ago what happened, the Battle of Bristol, when Virginia Tech played Tennessee. Tennessee ended up whooping Virginia Tech. But there was so much hype around that game because it was SEC versus ACC in a big game. Both those teams were supposed to be really good that year. And I just feel like if they could just have power programs play each other more, I just feel like it would make college football a lot more appealing because I don't want to watch Eastern Washington play LSU. I don't want to watch that.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you're saying there. In my opinion, I look at the SEC's standings this year, and every single team, I'm just going to say, okay, they play 4 out-of-conference games. Say, they're playing obviously a Power 5 school unless they get a waiver from the SEC because of a late cancellation. I'm going to put 3 wins on top of every team right now. That's just, the way mentally I do that. And I think the college football playoff is going to expand to 8 teams in the near future. I don't know when that's going to be, but I think when you see that college football playoff expand, the SEC will be like, oh, we can get more than 2 teams in there. Let's try to go for 3. So they're going to try to put more stronger opponents into these SEC schedules. Because obviously, you look at teams that are primed to make the college football playoff, they have some of the best schedules, or maybe they don't have good schedules. So I think inevitably a larger conference is best for the SEC. It's ratings, revenue, all of that stuff. But you got to leave a couple games in there because you don't want to have the backbone of college football programs, go down.
Exactly, yeah. That's why I kind of say with those conferences, you can have a cupcake game or 2. I don't mind it. That's how you evaluate your future talent. That's what you got to do. You get those starters in, they're out by halftime usually, and you play the younger guys. That's why I'm kind of missing that a little bit with Florida. They had a couple cupcakes on their schedule, but I was really looking forward to watching and seeing the future. Who's going to take the place of Kyle Trask possibly next year if he decides not to come back, which I don't think he will. I think he will go to the NFL, but you never know. Crazier things have happened. We're living in a pandemic right now, so you never know. But I wanted to see more of a guy like Emory Jones, the backup right now, the highest recruited quarterback Dan Mullen has ever had as a head coach. There's also another guy.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. We also got a guy in Anthony Richardson who is 6'4", 230 something. He's a big guy who's got mobility too with a big arm. I really think those kind of games have their place in college football, but if you just play all your out-of-conference games against those cupcakes, it makes it just so to where the SEC teams always find a way in. And I want to see more. I want to see an underdog story. I kind of want to see a UCF from a couple years ago take a swing at it. I kind of want to see that. I want to see those underdog teams like Cincinnati or BYU right now. I want to see those underdog stories get a shot at some of the top dogs in college football.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And even for a program like Arkansas, I think losing to Florida and Georgia honestly brought better feedback to the program and the work to do than beating like Colorado State or, even losing to them. Again, don't even want to think about that one because that happened. But I think just for college football programs and obviously with the playoff expansion, the SEC will kind of go that way. Now, who does Florida play this week again?
They got Vanderbilt on the road this coming week.
You don't even need to watch that game.
Nah. I went to that game live last year. That was my first ever Florida game that I went to live, and it was still a crazy experience. There are still 86,000 people there, But going into the game, you knew what was about to happen. Like, you knew what was getting ready to happen. So